What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we are reviewing Dying Light 2. So this game has been at the top of my list of RPGs since it was revealed a few years ago, and I have to say, guys, this one did not disappoint. This game really builds on the formula that made Dying Light 1 so successful. You have this incredible movement system throughout the game using their parkour system. The combat feels meaty, gives great feedback on hits. The progression and customization system is limited but somewhat engaging, which we'll get into. And overall, if you really liked Dying Light 1, you're really going to enjoy this one. So let's get into it. Now, the story of Dying Light 2 is one that features some pretty predictable twists and turns when it comes to the main narrative. I'm not saying it's bad. It's actually a really cool story so far. So you play as Aiden, who is this former pilgrim, and he's looking for his sister. So you might be asking yourself, what's a pilgrim? Well, these were these kind of intense individuals who would travel between settlements and survive in the outside world, which seems crazy to everyone inside the city of Villador. Now, eventually their reputation turns sour for some reason, and the next thing you know, people fear them and even lash out against them. You're going to get a lot of this during the story, and you're going to experience a lot of hatred towards pilgrims, especially a lot of mistrust. Now, along the way, you're going to meet some very interesting characters, some good, some bad, and some are just trying to survive, even if it's at your expense. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into spoiler territory here, but just know the story is worth playing. I'm about 20 to 25 hours in. I still have a ton more story to get through, and so far it's been pretty great. So one thing that Dying Light 2 added and heavily emphasizes are consequences in the game. So when you're interacting with characters, you're going to be asked some pretty hard questions, and you're going to be put on the spot to make a decision. Now, these decisions will affect the storyline and even the lives of some of the characters you interact with. So for instance, let's say you chose not to reveal that a character was plotting to backstab another character. Because you kept that to yourself, one of them ended up dying, and they are now completely out of the story, just altogether. They're gone. So as you go through these dialogue options and as you go through the storytelling, you have to be engaged and on your toes. It's not just something you can cruise through because it's going to affect what you do next. So that's the story. Let's dive into the world. Now, I will say this, right? So the world of Dying Light 2 is gorgeous and just so well done. You really feel like you're kind of trapped in this city that's barely clinging on during the apocalypse. You have cluttered streets full of zombies and infected. You have buildings that are caving in that you can explore for like all these sorts of treasures. And then you have just tons of destruction that really sells the theme. Now, the world is split into multiple zones. Each one is just full of things to discover. Peppered across the landscape are these windmills, and once you power these on, they're going to spawn a small outpost, and it's going to have vendors and a safe area, which then protects you from all of the night creatures. But you can also find hidden stashes, which are full of items and weapons, roof groves, which are great for replenishing your crafting materials, and even entrances to dark zones, which are difficult areas made specifically for nighttime exploration. So overall, the world of Dying Light 2 is vast, and honestly, it's a bit overwhelming at times with the amount of things that you can do. So there is no shortage of things to do in this game, guys. And one thing you want to keep an eye out for are military convoys and evacuation vehicles. So these areas are typically guarded by an elite enemy and a horde of biters, but they are definitely worth clearing out. Now, most of the time they do have unique items that'll either sell for a lot of money or let you craft a rare item. Also, be on the lookout for propane tanks, anything that has a fire extinguisher or an oxygen tank, because those will explode and they'll help you clear out all of the enemies. But be careful, because as you blow up those things, it's going to alert even more infected and going to cause a little bit, let's say, of a situation for you. So if you want to clear the place out quickly, you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork and take care of all the enemies that spawn afterwards. So one thing to know about the world is divided into zones, and each zone is given a level of up to 6. Now, this helps you understand the strength of the enemies in those areas. So, for instance, if you're level 1, you just started out, and you find yourself in a level 3 area, you're going to have a very bad time. These enemies have more health, more defense, and they're going to hit you extremely hard. So it's best to stay within the zones that are your level or at a maximum 1 level above. So that's everything you need to know about the world. Let's dive into the gameplay. So when it comes to gameplay, that iconic movement and parkour system of Dying Light definitely makes a return in this one. Traversing in this game, guys, traversing in this game feels incredibly good. Being able to leap across rooftops, vehicles, balance on tight ropes, launch off of rubber pads, all of these things just make it seem like everything in this world is accessible. Everything is within your grasp. And as you unlock more and more parkour skills, it gets even better. So at first, you're pretty limited, right? You don't really have a lot you can do. And this was frustrating for me because I would see something and go, oh man, I want to go check that out. And I would start climbing and my stamina bar would run out before I even got close. And it was just like, okay. And then I fell and I almost died because I fell so far. And it created kind of a frustrating experience at first. Then I realized I was in a level 2 area. And because of that, everything is balanced towards you having enough stamina or the same stamina that a level 2 player would have. So all of it really kind of made sense. So I went back into the level 1 areas and kind of, I guess, stayed in my lane per se, and was able to kind of upgrade and do all my stuff. And now I can access those things. So you're very limited at the beginning, and you really have to understand that because you're going to waste resources if you keep falling and hurting yourself. But like I said, as you unlock more and more of those parkour skills, it gets even better because you're going to start getting those, and then suddenly you have access to new buildings and areas that you've been to before, which creates this really nice incentive to revisit old areas and not just clear them and move on. And all of these zones are filled to the brim with things to fight. These range from bandits and peacekeepers to bruisers and biters, and all of which come with their very own attack patterns, behaviors, strengths, weaknesses, all of the good stuff, right? So as a player, it's up to us to figure out the best way to deal with these enemies. Obviously, you have like the low tier ones, right? The cannon fodder. They're very straightforward. You hit them a couple times, they fall over, they die. But then you have the elite enemies, things like the bruiser, things like the bolter, right? Bruisers have tons of health. They have a giant hammer kind of sewn into their arm or pierced through their arm, and they'll hit you with it and deal tons of damage. They're slow but powerful, so you have to figure out how to dodge and chip away at them. That way you can kill them and then loot them. Then from the human side of things, you have bandits, and these bandits are like regular humans, right? They're going to swing their weapons, they're going to block your attacks, they're going to counter, they're going to kick, they'll grab you and headbutt you, which makes like a quick action event, so you have to be able to spam like the space bar, for instance, to push them away. But then they'll also do things like use throwing knives or shoot arrows to deal damage from range, so they can hit you from up close, medium range, and long range. So you need to approach these two factions differently. For the infected, you can kind of just run in there and swing your weapon and slowly kind of chip away at their health. But for humans, they're much more strategic. So you need to be able to approach them differently. And ultimately, guys, the combat in this game is really fun and engaging. It's also extremely satisfying to just cut off pieces of your enemies, right? I mean, the way that you can just absolutely tear something apart is really cool. I don't mean that in a sadistic way, but I mean like if you have a zombie that's coming at you and you cut their legs off, suddenly they're not running at you, they're crawling at you. So you can kind of control the situation that way. But at the end of the day, this game plays out very similar to Dead Island and Dying Light, which are two of my favorite zombie games. It does enough to separate itself from being a simple hack and slash experience, but it keeps it simple enough that way somebody can pick it up and immediately have a good time without having to have a ton of knowledge or strategy going into it. So I want to talk about something a little bit different. So we talked about enemies we see in the game, right? Zombies, bolters, elites, humans. But I wanted to mention something specific, and that's anomalies. So anomalies are boss battles against a revenant, which is a special type of infected that combines different abilities that other infected enemies have. So for instance, I fought this one that was able to spit acid, but then also leap all over the place. And then it resurrected all of the zombies around it, so it kept kind of spawning ads. And it was such a cool experience because it took all of these unique traits of these other infected, slammed them together into one chimera type thing, and then we duked it out in an arena, and it was cool. So these were super fun. It forced me to play differently, and you also don't know what you're going to be walking into, right? You don't know what it is ahead of time. You don't know what its abilities are or the effects that it might have, and that's pretty fun. Obviously, the other half is taking care of business and collecting the loot, which we'll talk about in a second, but I really kind of started searching these out. These anomaly things were immediately something, probably my favorite thing to do in this game, and I wanted to find more of them. So the last thing I want to talk about regarding gameplay is the day and night cycle in this game. So just like in Dying Light 1, all the enemies in the game are dormant, right? They're kind of huddled inside during the day. They don't like the sun. But then once night comes around, these elite infected just roam the streets. They own the streets once the sun goes down. And even regular biters, which are like your kind of run-of-the-mill zombies, they even get supercharged. And it creates a very dangerous environment to be on the surface streets. But the trade-off there is that now that they're all out and about, those dark zones, which are full of rare items, weapons, all of that stuff, are pretty empty. So if you can make it through the streets and into a dark zone, you're going to have a huge payday. However, there is one other thing you really need to understand and make sure you keep an eye on. And this one I'm kind of torn on as to whether or not it was a good addition. When you enter darkness, whether it's out in the street or whether it's in a dark zone, you're going to have a clock slowly start counting down. This is your immunity meter. Once this reaches 0, you turn into an infected and you die. Game over, right? So you need to keep a stock of these things called immunity boosters, and using these will restore some of that meter and push the clock back towards the beginning. So if you want to play at night or go on any night excursions, you have to have a ton of these with you. Because if you don't, you're going to be constantly pressed for time and just make things much harder on yourself. They're not hard to craft, they're not hard to find, so make sure to bring a ton of them with you. So let's talk about some of those rare items that you'll get in these dark zones. So gear in Dying Light 2 follows the tradition of basically every other RPG. You're going to find tons and tons and tons and tons of items. They're all going to come with a rarity, even the consumables. And these rarities follow the same convention that we've seen since the dawn of time: common, uncommon, rare, unique, legendary, and artifact. Now, these rarities will affect how many affixes are on gear. So the more rare an item is, the more perks you will get. Now, weapons are a little bit different. So you can equip 4 of these at a time, and they can still drop with affixes, but they're also going to have 3 mod slots you can equip things into. And then you have an extra charm slot for some flair. That way while you're decapitating zombies, you can have like a unicorn or something flying around the screen, you know, because we're styling. But the other 3 mods will affect the way that this weapon works, and it works. These mods are insane. You can turn a ordinary hammer, just a regular ball-peen hammer, into a flaming hammer that blows up enemies when you land a critical strike. So you go from just regular damage to all of a sudden you hit something, an explosion happens, blows everything back, completely vaporizes whatever you managed to hit, and then you can kind of just keep on swinging and chunking through all of these mobs. And I love it. And the nice thing about mods in this game is that you can endlessly craft them. You don't have to use one and it's gone forever because you have the blueprint. So as long as you have the materials, you can endlessly attach them to new weapons, which you'll need to do because your weapons will lose durability in the game. And once that durability reaches 0, that weapon is gone. There is not a way to repair them that I've discovered yet. So that's something to keep in mind. And to complement the whole kind of gearing situation, you also have consumables. We talked about those immunity boosters earlier. You also have bandages that'll heal you. And then you have equipment, which is things for like throwing knives, coins, decoys, landmines, bait. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can use to make your life easier in Dying Light 2. And to answer the question that you might have, yes, most of these things can be crafted, which is a great transition to the crafting system. So in order to craft something, you need 2 things. You need the blueprint for the item and the materials to make the item. Now, once you have those 2 things, you can literally craft anything anywhere. You don't have to return to a workbench or an NPC or anything like that. This is the flexibility that I love because it lets me stay out in the world longer, minimize downtime, keep me in the action. I don't have to backtrack to an outpost in order to make more items. I literally just need to find a safe spot, craft a bunch of them. Now I'm back in the action. Now, these blueprints do come from a variety of sources. Some are rewarded from quests, others you can purchase, but just please remember, you don't have to buy every single blueprint. If something seems super basic, then don't waste your money on it because you'll probably get it as a quest reward later on. Now, these blueprints are also not static. So you can go and talk to a craft master and upgrade those blueprints, which results in the crafted item being stronger and more effective. So we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about progression. So remember we mentioned that the world is divided into zones that each have level ranges. So how do we increase our level to then match those zones? Well, throughout the world are things known as inhibitors, and these are in GRE caches. And these can be spent on upgrading your health or your stamina. And as you upgrade them, you're going to have access to more and more complex and useful skills. So once you upgrade both of these things, your health and your stamina, to level 2, then you level up to 2. Once they're 3, you're level 3, and so on. So it's a very simple process. Find inhibitors, spend inhibitors to upgrade one of those stats. As those stats go up, your level goes up as well. Like I said, very easy, very simple, very straightforward, but I do wish there was a little bit more customization here. I wish I could kind of tinker with the individual stats. So if I wanted to have a tank style character, then I could have a tank style character. More health, maybe a little bit slower, more strength. If I wanted to have a speedy, kind of quick crit-based build, then I could do that as well. But right now, there really isn't a way to customize your character other than upgrading those two things. However, there is one other thing we need to talk about, and those are the skill trees. So Dying Light 2 features 2 skill trees, one for combat, one for parkour. Now the combat tree, all about being more dangerous, right? Inflicting more damage, making yourself more versatile in combat, while the parkour tree helps with movement throughout the city, unlocking things like slides, being able to jump farther, increasing your climbing grip, decreasing your stamina consumption, all of those things, which then in turn unlock more places for you to go and explore. So overall, my time with Dying Light 2 has been just about as I thought it would be. Awesome. I really love what they put together here. It's a wide open world. You can freely explore it. It's full of things to discover and activate, which then in turn gives you more areas to explore and more things to discover. The combat feels tight and rewarding, and the progression system, it is limited and pretty lackluster in my opinion, but it doesn't pull away from the overall enjoyment and experience. I feel like the movement, being in the world and not being in a UI menu, is really where Dying Light 2 excels. So folks, that is my review of Dying Light 2. They have a roadmap so far of all the content coming in 2022, but if this game seems interesting to you, check out the link in the description below to find it on Steam. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
Sound off one and all, everybody. Don't take what you openly handed.